my first one was, I think, called the doctor session was September 20th, I think. So back by popular demand here. Kidding. Here we come again. I'm sharing my screen. Yes, this one, I think. So I thought to start first with a more typical HDF stuff, and then we'll go from there. For those who have not heard, I am one of the maintainers of h5py. Not very active in terms of communicating with users and all that, but I do have that status. So I usually revisit h5py when I have this call the doctor sessions, which is my second one. So we cannot call it a tradition, but also we cannot call it the first time. So we'll see how it goes. What happened since this September 20th? Let's see. I think this is the first one. I think, yes, September 21st. So this one was a user, which I would say, based by the name, kind of from my part of the world. And so, or maybe, or you know, hails from that part of the world, at least by ancestry. Anyway, he basically reported a slowdown when he is created a virtual data set and tried to slice a virtual data set compared to a single file. And he actually presented pretty detailed profiling information, and then also for a virtual data set and for this one. And as far as the discussion goes, nothing really. The only thing I said usefully was he was using h5py 2.10, which is a very old version. So I said, how about you try with something more recent? And he tried, and nothing really improved. He's using HDF5 1.10.6 as the library version, and basically it is in the state of who knows where this is going to go, but no one picked it up to really look into it closer. But I'm not very familiar with virtual data set. I'm not using it, or I'm not in the community that actually using virtual data sets. So I can't comment more on what the problem might be, but that's, I think, an interesting case for looking where's the slowdown. Is it really in the HDF5 library level, or it's really on h5py side? Here's another case with a virtual data set where someone wanted to read only a specific field out of a compound data type from a virtual data set. And in this case, I think the recommendation was that that's basically not possible in h5py. Oh, no, sorry, in HDF5 library, that one cannot get just a field in a compound data type of a virtual data set. I have not personally checked that, but again, this is at the state of at least there is some definitive answer here. Anyone who wants to jump in, just jump in forward. This one also happened actually very recently, 2 days ago. Someone was trying to create a netcdf4 file, and for those who may not know what it is, fundamentally it's an HDF5 file, although created by a different library called netcdf, which is very, very popular and widespread in geoscience. And so they used the Fuse S3 file system emulation, and they reported essentially a segmentation fault at the point where the HDF5 file was being cloned. And I happen to know, and they provided a stack trace. I actually happen to know this problem, or have seen this stack fault before. And it happens in h5py was reporting, and it happened where one would close essentially a file-like object in Python that HDF5 library was still not aware that it was closed. I don't know if, again, people are aware, but in h5py, since maybe 3 years ago, one can actually present a file-like object to h5py. And at that point, HDF5 library is going to use what is called, Garrett, correct me if I'm wrong, virtual file layer API. And essentially use that object as it would be using a normal file. And if someone or some other process, something would actually close that file-like object before finishing with the HDF5 library business, the HDF5 library would segfault in exactly the same place. And so my answer was basically that this is, and here is one of the h5py maintainers actually provided an example. Actually, this is an existing h5py case, which is skipped right now because it's segfault, the whole thing. Exactly what I was telling about. So you create this file-like object, you basically tell it to the h5py and HDF5 library to use it to create a file and everything else. And then you close it before actually closing the file on the HDF5 library side. And so my comment was, oh, he actually liked twice. Excellent. That at this point, in this case, I didn't see the point of using this Fuse S3 file system emulation because there are no partial writes to an HDF5 file in S3 as a single object. And so I assume that what really happens is that there is a temporary HDF5 file somewhere in the local file system. And so I said that this is really not a good example or not a good use case of a Fuse file system emulation. And so persons should create a normal netcdf4 file, which is the HDF5 file, and they just put it in S3 if they need so. So we'll see, but the person who reported it has not responded one way or the other. And then to today, I should hurry up. Quite new from today. This is a case where someone says that h5py, when someone uses a less conventional compression filter, that it's not that information, what that filter is not available through h5py. And I think that's a fair actually, it's a good issue. I noticed this problem when I was working with less conventional HDF filter compressors or compression filters. And that's something that probably could be handled on h5py side alone. So I think this probably can have a good chance of actually being done something. Because right now, the h5py way how it deals with compression in general, it's a little more, either I would say too old, should be revisited, or has to be refreshed for the age where there are many more compression filters than before. And so I think this one has a good chance of actually being worked on. I don't know who, but I think it's doable because it's probably on the Python side. May actually require some changes in h5py interface. We'll see. This one is, I think, from someone who probably has not followed the variable length saga in HDF5, but basically this is a SI-verse, seems to be a project organization regarding genomic data, and they are discovering that variable length strings, in their case, but in general variable length data are not really compressed in the current implementation of HDF5 library, and so there is quite a difference between the file sizes. And I have not responded here to person to tell them that that's a known deficiency in current HDF5 library and file format. But what is interesting here, though, that he's actually using the new HDF Group documentation links, which is very nice. They somehow failed to find the support of the HDF Group, the old deprecated website. So all the credit to this person for digging this up correctly. And actually, he points out to an RFC that talks about some ideas that the company had, but never did anything about it. And then he actually posted the question on the HDF forum. So yeah, so basically this needs an answer, but unfortunately, I don't think we can help this person on HDF5 side. They'll have to find something else. Or maybe they want to do the new HDF5 sharded distributed file format that's supported by HSDS, and so that may work for them. But then they don't have files anymore the way they think about it. So we'll see. So with that, I'm done with the tour around h5py land. I don't have any questions or not, but if not, we can move to the main topic of today. And actually talk about general metadata conventions and structures in HDF5. That's posted a week ago. Is it exactly a week? How convenient. It is exactly a week. By Stefan, yes. So I will be very quickly and briefly, and then Stefan, you can describe your use case or why you asked this question. But I personally am a big believer in conventions and standardization when it comes to producing files or data in general. And I'm a great supporter, and I personally have been involved in quite a few efforts to achieve that. And so for my personal opinion, I think that HDF community really missed great opportunity here to have something reasonable but minimal and applicable to many different use cases or communities, so that in the long run, we could all benefit basically having our own software that can all, by the way, just open just about any other HDF5 file to some degree and make it more useful. And so, although now it's a bit too late maybe to make it such a general impact, because now how many years we have HDF5 around, and many communities have already gone in their different directions. I still think that, it's never too late to do something. And so with that, I hand you over, Stefan, and tell about your use case and what you think about all this.
Yeah, so it's material science, let's call it like that. And in Germany, there are many efforts right now to get to a more digital research landscape. And from a programming perspective, its standards are good, especially if they are optional, if they are suggestions. Like if I call this attribute unit or units, makes for me programmatically a huge difference. If I know it's called unit, I can go and look for the attribute with the name unit. If it can be also units or capital or some other spelling, the coding becomes much more difficult, right? There are not many cases. So I was looking for some recommendations, let's call it like that, of how certain structures are called. And units is something which is everywhere in everything, basically, right? Is it unit? Is it units? How is it spelled? Then how is a string composed? But that's a minor issue. And the second thing that I was looking at, what is a hierarchy that you prescribed? For example, Nexus likes to have its data in the third hierarchy level. And if you already know where the data is, you have to write less if statements, less for loops. The code becomes cleaner, less buggy, less everything, right? So from my point of view, I was looking for some suggestions of how data should be structured. Whether people then comply to it is a different question. But if the HDF5 forum, which has one of the widest reach, has some specification, it really helps the programmer, because otherwise everything can become a CSV file, which again can be anything, right? So that's why I was looking for some definitions. And if one follows in the schema.org, then one has in a minimal set of terms that I can look for. in the attributes, and things become much easier for in the programming world. So that was the background for my, or that's use case basically.
Yes, yes, you're right. So first of all, I have to mention that not so long ago, maybe I would say next 2 years or so around, I think Garrett, who is now at this meeting, he wrote a proposal to actually add physical units to HDF5 data type.
Mm-hmm.
So that you actually are able to define in a completely physically sound, interoperable way through 7 fundamental SI units, your whatever unit is.
Yes.
And that becomes, immutable part of your HDF5 data type definition.
Mm-hmm.
But we did not get funded. And the one main reason that I think we didn't get funded because we applied at a National Science Foundation, which is a U.S. government main scientific funding body. We actually applied in a directorate that already had a very well community-driven convention that covered all these things. So we kind of went somewhere where they thought they solved this problem. Not on such a fundamentally correct place where our proposal was, but they thought for ourselves we solved this problem. So I think that was the reason. But otherwise, I think that proposal still has a lot of applicability, but need the funding to happen. Without that, I think that you're right. I mean, what you mentioned is exactly right. So first, you have to agree on what goes into a file as recommendations. And from efforts that I was part in, also it's very helpful to say that this is strongly recommended. This is highly recommended. You sort of break down these things in a blocks, and you say we really strongly recommend these things to be in the file. Then highly recommended on top of that have this, and then strong this kind of thing. So that's one, so that people can pick and choose, for example.
Exactly. And I might not suggest it to make it too many recommendation levels, because that again adds confusion, difficulty, either it's recommended or not recommended. And regarding the physical sound unit level, yes, we all would love that, and if something is there, but that again makes it a little bit complicated, because you have to have an underlying model for it. What is, for example, an acceleration? It's some length, and you have the time, and there has to be this ratio and things like that, which requires some model in the background. But it can be much simpler. Just what is the spelling large case or small case, single case, or that already would help in an enormous way. Because as soon as you have a model, there are discussions. SI units, imperial units. How do you build the model? A model can be built 15 different times, and then there are 20 different opinions of people. So the more simple the suggestion is, I think the more it is picked up. I mean, that's also why HDF5 has such a huge success, because it's simple. You need three terms basically: create a group, create a data, and add attributes. 3 things. Everything, you can build everything with it. And so I would suggest to make it simple and to not have these discussions, because nobody cares at the end whether it should be uppercase or lowercase. There won't be a discussion. But as soon as you add a model to it, people have opinions, and it will become a discussion, and it will take forever. So in that sense, I would suggest, I'm an external person, I know all that, to keep it simple.
I'm very aware of these discussions. When people start using names, other people, it gets out of hand very quickly. Yes. Sometimes. But so yes, I mean, so to come back, so you could do this and may say, here is the minimum. Also, once you agree even on that content, another very important thing is to have ability to have a validation, so that you very quickly and very easily you start catching errors.
Exactly.
Because if you just have a document that says, you know, you should have this and this and this, and those things should be named like this, and these are the values, you're going to have someone do it wrongly.
Exactly.
And unless there are tools that are
Exactly.
available to check those things as soon as possible,
Exactly.
likely for the data production site, then things just start going more complicated. So yeah, that's also my experience. But for getting validation and tools, you need time, because that's software. Someone has to write software. So that's why I say, that's why I opened up with my opinion that valuable time has been lost in getting something to this point. So, you know, I'm not pessimistic in the future, but I'm saying, you know, we lost 20 years. Now let's see, you know, if we even decide something to happen and how quickly something can happen to actually people see the value. But the other thing, there's a lot of things actually. It's a very interesting topic, but there are one other thing I wanted to mention is, from my experience, there are two major categories of metadata, if you will. One is that's really tied to the data in the file, like what you mentioned, the unit. That's really, you know, for the data that's in the file. The other part of the metadata, in my world where I operate, usually it's called discovery metadata. So that's the metadata that essentially you would have in a file, but the purpose of this metadata is actually to be harvested into some catalog or some search kind of engine, and then allow those people to find the data easier. So not necessarily the information about the file itself, but it kind of leads searches towards that data in the file.
Yes.
And so those two things that, in my opinion, kind of always tend to go together. One, the use metadata, units, other things that we can talk about that goes in there, that's really for the using the data in the file. The discovery metadata is what brings someone to that file with the data in, for example.
And yes, exactly, like, is it the author or is it the person? Things like that. And if there are some suggestions for it, again, it should not be mandatory, but if there are some suggestions, that would be helpful. Yeah.
And so you mentioned schema.org, which I completely agree with you, and I'll tell you why. Because at least, so for those who may look at it and say they know what schema.org is, this is schema.org, and it's I don't know how old it is, I forgot that, but it's pretty big international effort to sort of develop vocabularies for describing a lot of things. And so I've noticed for a number of years how schema.org got interest in your application to many domains that I usually operate in. And primarily it was first the web pages of our things that the Google pick up easier, but then started going more into the file. And I'll just mention you, because at least in this country, in the US, there is this thing called breaking news. And in breaking news today, I would say half an hour ago before this session, actually, I got an email that one community where I'm very involved with, it's called Earth Science Information Partners, this ESIP thing. They just published that they're adopting science and schema.org as their recommendation to implement in the files for Earth Science data. And actually they developed, because ESIP, this organization, they have a number of clusters, which is just basically volunteers organizing around a common goal and common need. And so there is a cluster that was formed to, and I think they're maintaining this science. But anyway, they just said today, half an hour ago, that this is now the officially adopted way how to include schema.org into the scientific data set. And by data sets in this case, we think about files, not HDF5 data set, which is a multidimensional array. So just to clarify that. And so if you go here, basically there is a guidelines now that basically says how to describe it, conformity, keywords, all the. I haven't looked much, and obviously there is a little slant towards geosciences because there is a spatial coverage and all the other things that are more relevant to geospatial data. But I think this is another pointer to me that schema.org really is relevant and probably the best starting point at this time for whatever we are thinking to do. Again, one benefit of coming late is that maybe there is some good work already happened that you can just adopt. And so I'm just throwing this out here so are more aware.
No, I agree with you. And I mean the challenge from the programming point of view is to read all these text blocks, text things. All right, there's a lot of things to read, and and as long as it's a recommendation, it's fine because then you don't have to read it. But if it becomes a requirement, it gets difficult for people to program into it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is, I think, what they're mostly born. I haven't checked yet, but knowing where they started from, I think that they pretty much looked from the schema.org data set vocabulary and then basically try to just modify it more maybe for science data. But for example, these things, and again, there are plenty of them, but who can object if you say abstract to have as a root level attribute? Nobody can say, hey, I don't like it. I mean, you don't have to use it, but you know, it's something that basically you could argue it's fairly reasonable thing.
Yes,
and things like that. I don't know if they have title. I'd be surprised if they don't have title. That thing has always a good use. But anyway, so I'm trying to say maybe these are the starting points of saying, okay, out of all of this, these are the things that we highly recommend. We strongly recommend some other. Highly encourage you to do even more of these things, and then you sort of break them up and then let people decide what they want. Now there's a whole other body of things. Okay, but what are the values going to be? And then allow every different domain and community decide what their value is going to be and how to make sure that you're explaining things in these various communities. That's a little more work. But as I said, you can always say these are the names of the attributes, for example, in HDF5 file, and if someone likes them. Interesting, they don't have a title. Oh, interesting. Okay, I have to check a little bit more. But anyway, I just wanted to throw this, as there is a lot of things that we can start from. And because we are already close to half an hour, the big question now is how to proceed.
I mean, the obvious thing is, things have to happen always yesterday. I mean, that's everywhere, right? So for me, I was looking for something, and I'm not happy with the solution that I found now with this Nexus format, because again, it builds or requires a model, and you have to agree to the model, and huge discussions going on there. But it has a validator, as you said. It has some structure, so that's why I now picked it a little bit reluctantly, but it is a solution. And so I would really look forward to HDF5 specifying something, because then also all the downstream packages can adopt it. They don't have to adopt it, but they can adopt it. And as long as you stay within one system, you can quite easily change, because you just write a small script that changes the name, right? It's a loop, a for loop, look for name, change it to title or something like that. These things are pretty straightforward. But I would really encourage the HDF5 group to go in this direction. I think it would add much ease to the people programming things. Yeah. And if
so here's the question.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you had a question, and I always like that.
I have a question. For example, the first one is, this always helps if it's a community effort.
Sure.
Not coming from top down or someone else. And so to the effect that HDF Group as a company can help. Again, I am currently employed by this company, and so I'm definitely willing to help my passion about these things and my experience towards helping move forward. But I think would be more effective when we had some kind of more diverse and more authoritative body that would look into these things and say, okay, we like it, you know, or something like that, rather than here's HDF Group and take it or leave it kind of approach.
I am a little bit of an partial outsider, so I like to develop my own things and not go too much in a group, but I can also reach out to some people in some groups that I'm involved in and talk to them, whether they would be interested, and that would be a very German-based group of people. But on the other hand, HDF5 is basically the parent of many of the file structures. So that makes it also attractive collaborating on it. So it has, because it's a parent, it has the benefit of achieving something compared to it's just a project that is like a grandchild or grandchild, then it's only in the subdomain. So I could talk to some people, but I only can commit right now myself.
Of course.
That's not a lot. So in that sense, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think
go ahead.
Yeah. I think one forum, we don't have one right now, but we had one in the past, and we will have one again soon, would be a technical advisory board. So we had a technical advisory board where about a dozen members of sort of key stakeholders in HDF5 from the DOE and so forth, but not only from the DOE, also scientists, and we should have something like that again soon, and then that would be the kind of forum where to, in double quotes, lobby ideas like that, or say, hey, there is a community-wide need here. What's going on in your domain and so forth, and how can we make this happen? Well, make your case and convince us that this is a direction we should go in. But then once that's clear, let's think about where we find the money, where do we find the resources to move this forward. And so yeah, definitely. I mean, that shouldn't prevent us from starting a conversation and thinking about these things, and just meet maybe bi-weekly or monthly, and because this is something that's been around, and it's been solved. And again, Aleksandar can speak to that much better. It's some people think they've solved this, and they probably have solved it at a domain level, but that unfortunately leaves people who are coming late to the party, or who yet have to solve that problem for their domain. And then the question is, at which point is it just redundant or wasteful to ask every community, okay, you have to solve this problem again in an ad hoc fashion for your community, or can't we come up with something that works for everybody and develop the tooling that goes with it once and for all? Doesn't mean that there won't be specialized solutions in the future.
Sure.
Be the case, but let's do for the common good what we can do now.
And the problem with let's say more discipline focused approach is, I'm calling myself mostly a material scientist. So we have connections to physics, chemistry, even biology, mechanical engineering. Which domain should we listen to in our structure? Should we listen to the chemistry people, or should we listen to, and if we listen to one, we cannot collaborate with the other one. So I think even in the concept of interoperability and interdisciplinarity especially, these domain focuses are really, or have the potential of requiring always special cases, requiring converters, and all these things are waste also ecological waste and so on. So
no, that opportunity is gone now. That actually there was something at the very beginning of HDF5 that like you just mentioned, Stefan, you looked at the Nexus, you wanted to do something. Maybe Nexus was not exactly what you wanted, but you adopted it because there was at least something already there. And that's exactly what I was referring to at the beginning. A minimum reasonable amount of metadata would have gone a long way, because everyone would look at it and say, oh, okay, I mean, I see author. Author is like everywhere. So why should I not use author? And I'm done with this part at least. And then only add more things that are matter to me, but at least all these files would have author and we knew what author was, those kind of things. And now that's gone. And so whatever is now happens, it's, as I said, it's going to have much less impact, because there are so many approaches now that are going completely independent that maybe at some point they decide to converge here and there, but it's not. But that's, you know, that's it. That's history. You can't go back.
But also the first mover is not always the winner. You cannot look at MySpace. Also, nobody knows MySpace anymore, or Facebook in a few years. So things change, and I think, I mean, we also learn from, or we could learn from other people's ideas, and therefore simplify it.
So I mean, we'll discuss a little. As I said, we can always propose something, for example, as a hook for other people's discussion, and see how they go. And I think that we never talked actually, but the data model that you're implying to. I think that, you know, we can talk about these things that I'm showing on the screen, date created and, you know, editor and those kind of things, but they more like feel like more like attributes to something.
Exactly.
Whereas the question is what that something would be and how should be. And again, from my experience in the communities where I am, the most flexible and the most basic model that there was that there is a HDF5 data set that holds the scientific data, and there is a bunch of HDF5 data sets that are associated with that one as coordinates. And then those things tend to be the most flexible and movable, because nothing else matters. What groups they are, under how many groups, where the level, whatever, doesn't matter. Here's my scientific data, and here are my coordinates for my scientific data. And that's the kind of the atomic understanding of things that I need.
Yeah, so I would suggest you ask before, how do we continue? I think after this discussion, we can talk to people and see where some people are. And then we have each other's contacts, and then we try to think how we want to continue this.
Okay.
This topic. That's my suggestion, at least.
No, I agree. This has to be a sort of volunteerish effort, at least at the beginning.
Sure.
To get it from the going.
We won't get immediate funding. That's always the case, right?
All right. Well, I'm out of the talking points and agenda.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for talking about it. And,
thank you for your time, and see you guys around.
Yes. Yep. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right.
All right.
I'll stop sharing now. And oh, there are more people. Okay, sorry. Any questions? Oops. I was not told.
No, but, good session, Aleksandar. And
no problem.
We'll be back next month. So yeah.
Yes. All right. Then. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.